Welcome to Miss IJ's Kids Inclusive Podcast. My name is Anyaoku-Popoola, and you can call me IJ. I will be your host. On this podcast, we'll be talking about the stigma individuals with special needs face on a day-to-day basis on the continent of Africa. We'll be bringing to you professionals in the disability field, sharing resources and information that can benefit any educator, parent, caregiver, and community with persons with disabilities. Join me on this journey in spreading hope and resilience as we advocate for inclusive education on the beautiful continent of Africa. According to the World Health Organization, depression is one of the leading causes of disability. Suicide is the second. High-income earning countries have shown progress in raising awareness of mental health issues. However, in developing countries, stigma, discrimination, and human rights violations are significant causes of mental health conditions. Treatment and health in these countries are extremely low. Growing up in Nigeria, I was fortunate to have supportive parents who could afford health care and give our family all the love and support we needed. This is not always the case for students with disabilities in many parts of Africa. In today's episode, I'll be talking to a high school friend of mine, Anyaoku-Popoola. We went to the same secondary school and share stories about growing up in Nigeria and what mental health means on the continent as it pertains to students and individuals with disabilities. Hi guys, welcome back to the Miss IJ's Kids Inclusive Podcast. Today we have a very special guest. Like we had spoke about in our IG Live, we went to high school together, and I've already told you a lot about her bio and what she does, but here on the show, I have her talking about, or I want her to talk about mental health awareness when it comes to students with special needs or just individuals in general. And because this is an inclusive podcast, we can't talk about certain things with disabilities without thinking about our mental health. And I reached out to her because, maybe in our discussions today, we're going to talk about, our upbringing in school and how we went to school and how things about mental health awareness were never really shared or never really talked about. And so, I just want to say a big thank you for taking the time to come on the show. So could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
First of all, thank you, Ivy, for having me on the show. I'm honored, and it's a great job you do. Well, you said quite a bit, and what I do is communications, PR comms, and my connection with mental health began some years ago because I kept on having people come up to me and share their problems and things with me, and I've even had a couple of people tell me that they wanted to commit suicide. At that time, there was quite a lot information to deal with somebody or people you know. So I did some research, but I became an advocate properly about 2 years ago because I had a couple of teens come up to me saying that they're not happy with the life they're living and they had big dreams of, going to school and becoming lawyers and etc. But there they were on the streets of Abuja selling DVDs because their families couldn't afford to send them to school. So that's how we began, and I started working with those two, and more people came. And then part of my work involved giving them some of my material, books on leadership and things like that, and self-development. But I figured, how many of these things would I give out to these people? So I created the course, and some things I've learned, some things I've observed, and personal experiences, like dealing with such people.
Okay. Okay. Now, in terms of mental health, what did you see with these students that you were working with that made you become really passionate about maybe talking to them about their mental health, or even looking at our Nigerian youth and realizing that the issue of mental health awareness now it is, but back then it wasn't really talked about or brought up. What was it exactly about those two students, which I think you talked about? You said that they were going to be lawyers, and then they ended up selling DVDs, and for our listeners in the Western world, that's like on the streets, may not necessarily even have a storefront, just selling DVDs so that people can buy. So what was it about them that really moved you into doing that?
Well, I'd known them for quite a bit. You know how you have people you go and buy stuff from.
Mm-hmm.
They were stationed in front of an eatery, and anytime I go back by there, sometimes they'll tell me, "Oh, buy my DVDs." Once in a while, I'll buy it. Or, they were there for about a year or so.
Mm-hmm.
They saw a friendly face. I really don't know. They approached me.
Wow.
They came to me. That's interesting. They found me, so they kind of got me into this, and they say, "Hey, this is what we want to do." And they came separately, didn't come at the same time, but they're both stationed in the same place. And how do we go about it? And for me, is that they talked about law. I'm not a lawyer, but my father was a lawyer. So it's like, what are the odds that they would come to me, to ask this? So I told him what, because my father spent his life together trying to convince me to study law, and I wasn't into it. So what I did was kind of tell them some of the things he told me, because a lot of my development, he did it. A lot of things I teach is that I had the advantage of having a father who was very present and hands-on about training each other. And I realized now that a lot of people didn't have that opportunity. Mm-hmm. And some of the questions I asked, ironically enough, those are questions he asked me, and I'm like, oh God, there's so many questions. He can ask you a million questions in 1 minute. And I kept answering, but I found out that it became part of me.
Right. And
asking them, they responded to it. And I'm like, okay, these guys are responsive.
Right.
And they've come to me. And we worked, they are mentees, so they don't pay for the course, One of them is on a straight path now. I'm really proud of him. But the other one was doing drugs, apparently, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's what happened. They came to me, and I felt, okay, let me see what I can do.
Okay. So we talked about the thing that you do, which I know of it as journaling. And if I can say that you use journaling as a way to help people work through certain mental health issues, or, just help them. I also know that you're an author and that you wrote a book, and it is called, and I don't want to mispronounce it right, but it is The Demystification of Stephen. And one thing I also want to let our listeners know is that you're a writer, and you use your writing as a way to advocate for people with who needs mental health advocacy. So could you please speak a little bit on that?
Okay, yes. I told you that a lot of what I do is because of people. People kind of, I don't know, I think there's something about the earth sending the right, prompts to you.
Yes, like the universe kind of. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, universe. And then there's a pattern, and journaling helped me to see that pattern. I sat down, in the process of journaling, like, okay, for a long time, since I was like 10, I had a friend that I hate my mother. I want to do this to her. She was really bitter about her mother. And then I realized that throughout, there are different people coming to me with random issues that I personally, couldn't solve. So it just kind of looks like a sign. So for me, I believe journaling, and that is documenting your thoughts basically in a very strategic manner, helps you to see things more clearly. It helps you to look at patterns. It helps you to sort out your emotion, And with the demystification of Stephen, when I wrote it, I didn't realize that there was a lot of mental health reflections on it. I wrote it, was published 5 years ago.
Right.
But a lot of it shows how life situations affected people. It's about one guy, but all the people around him, how it affected them. And some things that show up as, bad character or snobbishness or, all kinds of things is a reaction to bad circumstances that have affected their mentality. Mm-hmm. So that is what the demystification of Stephen is about. When people look at it, they think it's a romance novel, but it's not like that. It's just a satire, really.
Really? So what's your view on Africa as a continent? And the idea of people taking care of their mental health, your view on Africa and mental health awareness, and the idea of people, Africans, taking care of their mental health.
Oh, there's so much, let me start what happened. There was this man when I was a child. He was in my village because we used to go for Christmas. Every Christmas we go to the village. Mm-hmm. And this man was really well dressed. Like he'd wear a shirt and a tie and talking he looks very neat. But they said that he was, they said that he wasn't well mentally. And they called it, in Hausa, it's called iskoki, which means the winds have taken up his senses. That's what it means. Yeah. So they're like, even though he's like this, he's very intelligent. So he'd walk into a class and sort of mouth songs and board and everything. But when it came to human relationships, it was kind of, And now reflecting on this, like this man, I think he was of the autistic. We didn't know that because people were ignorant about it. Mm-hmm. So, and then you have old people suffering from dementia and other, mental health issues. Mm-hmm. And they say, he's gone mad, or she was a witch. There are people who have been ostracized by their children because they thought, they are witches. That is why it's manifesting in such a way. Wow. But now we understand that certain things you have seen are not as a result of somebody who's into witchcraft or somebody who the winds have carried senses. Is because they had a developmental issue. Mm-hmm. And I think if people knew that, they would have treated these people differently. Yeah. There's an old people's home here in Abuja where there are 100-year-olds, 98-year-olds.
That's good.
And the proprietors told me for a couple of them, the children dumped them and moved abroad. So they don't send money. They don't contact them. It was almost like, this is our witch. Let's dump them here and run away. Wow. They didn't realize that this is old age and some of these things show up. So there is need for that. And then for the everyday African, it's that Nigerians tend to hide behind humor a lot. I mean, I think it's beautiful that we can laugh at things.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or we dance it away. Or we go to a party.
When something bad happens, immediately there's a meme on social media.
Right.
You don't take time to process it.
So in your perspective, do you think because this is not just Nigeria, this is probably Africa as a continent. Do you think that we are in dire need of mental health care, or even mental health awareness and management, on a government level, local level, and, having advocates like you help, families and young people? Is this something that we're just in dire need of it?
Yes, I think we need it. And it probably should be integrated to the school system because they have more control on parents and on the children. So I think that could be a step, forward. In terms of school, a lot of people are scarred from primary school.
You took me all the way to Queen's College, but go ahead.
Right. But ours was not so bad. Have you heard about other schools?
I know. Right. I totally understand, but you're right. In terms of school, we need our teachers to. I mean, now it's better. It's not just okay to maybe look at it from Africa is such a bad situation. It's slow progress, but it's still some progress. Like even us having this conversation that can be seen all over the world is progress, and we're talking about it. What else do you think that we could probably do, as Africans in the diaspora in terms of mental health care and just raising more awareness?
I think more psychologists need to connect with the psychologists here. Now I'm an advocate, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm teaching writing as a means of managing your mental health simply because it worked for me. It's something I practice. It worked for me and I'm into writing. And then when I started doing this, I realized the psychologists use it too. I didn't really know much about that, Now I found out, oh, it's a powerful tool that they use. But like I tell people, journaling can help you manage your mental health when you're disillusioned and when you're sad. When it comes to full on depression, you need a higher power. And that's what the psychologist come in. I don't deal with that.
Yeah.
I just can tell you, okay, this is beyond me. You are no longer sad. You're no longer disillusioned.
Yes.
You have reached the stage of depression, and you need to move and look for a psychologist.
Right.
Now, a lot of psychologists, there's some people who study psychology here in Nigeria, but they seem to move on to other things. They moved on to becoming bankers, writers, all kinds of things, because there wasn't any platform
support.
For them to support.
Resources.
There were no cases.
Yes. No diagnosis. Exactly.
Yes, no diagnosis. Nobody was coming out saying anything.
Yes.
But now people are talking. Now people say, look, my mental health. Mental health is now, I don't know, it's something people talk about more freely.
Wow. So I want to go back to your journaling, but I want to still stay on on questions relating to our African traditions and how we view mental health. So we talked about the elderly man, which, I mean, my heart you said that and I was like, wow, how many cases do we have in Nigeria, parts of Africa, where you just leave somebody as, oh, there's something wrong with them. And I love what you said and how you translated it in Hausa, is that the wind has almost shifted this person's destiny, but the person is actually smart because, and I think this is where I would love this podcast to be a bridge, in that just because one person is really good at something or really bad at something, if we're able to take the good in people, because the one thing we say in our field and with special needs is that, why do we always want someone with disabilities to fit into our world? Maybe your normal is not the right normal.
Yeah.
We always want them to fit into our world, and we're so afraid to fit into their world because we don't understand sign language. We don't understand, how to work with someone who's autistic, And so now we label people as, what, like you said, the wind has shifted their destiny. So what can we do? Just looking back at how maybe we're raised and our schools, what can we do with our traditions? Like, now you talked about your father. I want to talk about that a bit, because I know, and I've seen, because we know each other, I've seen how you admired him so much. And if it's okay for me to say, God, bless and rest his soul in peace. But how you were raised had a lot to do with your journey and your story right now. What can you say for, parents? We're all now parents now, or we know people who are parents at our age, in introducing our children to things that are related to mental health awareness that are in our community or Africans in the diaspora. What would be the advice that you can give us, from how you were raised or things that your dad expressed to you?
Okay, my father he was a good listener.
He was a good listener.
He wasn't quiet.
I need to write that down.
My father was an orator, he was an extrovert. But for an extrovert, he had an amazing way of listening. So he'd listen and say, my dear, this is what I want you to do, And for me, is that every time, for every goal I've ever achieved, he's like, this is lovely, my dear, but you can do more. You have the potential. And from childhood, my father would look at all of us and he'd say, I've seen the future. We are all going international. So already I had an international mindset living in Lagos because he told me, look, we can do this. At one point when I was around 12, my father looked at me and told me, wow, you're so tall. I'm sending you to the US to go and play basketball. And how tall was I tall? Again, it's like, come, I wasn't that tall. But then I was like, wow. And I was always struggling for space in the front line because my father told me I'm tall.
That's amazing.
Him. So because of the mentality and the way he's made me look at myself, and all of us, there's very little people can do to make me feel less. Because for me, it's like, oh, if he approves of it, then who are all these people? That's what I passed on to one of my mentees. He the one selling the DVDs. He now works at an airline. One day I'll tell the story of how he did that. He now works with an airline. I'm so proud of him. But and that's within 2 years.
Yes.
So one day he told me, he called me, he's like, oh, he feels bad because at his workplace he laughed at his English that he doesn't speak well. That his English is rough. I said, well, do you talk to me? He said, yes. I said, do they speak better than I do? And he's like, no. I said, you know, so if I'm not laughing at you, who are they? They're just jealous of you because, you know, you have potential. They can see that you have, and I really believe he does have a bright future. So he keeps coming, you know, when he's down, he calls me and talk him up. But that's what my father did. There's something else I want to say about what my father did. You know, African parents, when you say, oh, I'm afraid I can't sleep in this room at night, you're like, go back to your room and everything. Everything's okay. It's your mindset. My father didn't do that. I was like 20 and I started working, and this guy in my workplace told me, oh, he's in a cult. And that by me telling me he's in a cult, he's going to be in trouble, but they'll come for me tonight. And I was terrified. So I sat in my room, the lights were on, and my dad was doing his normal, middle of night, goes around, checks everything, you know. And he noticed that my light was on for 3 nights in a row. And then he knocked one night, like 2 a.m. And he's like, I should come to the living room. We sat down. He's like, what's going on? So I told him, okay, would you like me to sit with you? So yes. So we sat down. And he's like, when I feel sleepy, I should tell him. And we sat down for like an hour. I'm like, I'm feeling sleepy. And then it's okay. And we did that for like a week. You know, he could have told me this is rubbish because he was born again. He was Christian. He could have told me, let's pray over it, and, you know, but yeah, he prayed over it, but also he gave me a space to feel free to tell him what the situation is. So I think more African parents need to be open to their children, allow them to speak their mind, and also treat them not like, oh, this rubbish child, and talk to them, you know, one-on-one.
Amazing. That story, I think, is going to inspire so many people, because what you've said now is that even though some of us had experiences in our African communities where our parents may have brushed off what we said or didn't listen, you're saying that your dad was, the story of him just sitting down with you to work you through the trauma of what somebody said is huge. And that culturally, maybe, you know, they would have said, oh, it's okay, you know, just blown it off, you know, but he took how you felt in that moment extremely seriously. And that's huge. I know to us, that's a big deal. Some people may not fully understand when you really take into context, you know, how some of us were raised, or some of us who maybe went to boarding school and things were done that shouldn't have been done. All those things are all traumatic experiences, and all those things are triggers, you know?
Yeah.
And for the students who, a lot of us came to, let's say, the Western world, and we went to school, and we found out that if we had psychologists or we had therapists, you know, so many things would have been diagnosed and life was so much easier, but we couldn't put a name to it. And it was harder for us to function. Because that's the one thing about Nigerians, you know, overseas. We're like, oh, Nigerians are so successful, you know, like overseas. But a lot of those things that we went through, if you look at it, are quite traumatic.
Yeah, traumatic. One of my friends went to boarding school, guy, and he talked about how somebody, I don't know how gory this would be. It was pretty gory what they did to him. And this is years later, but I felt really bad when he told me that a senior did certain things to him, like just kill him already. Do you understand? It was really, I don't want to, you know, say it, but it was terrible.
It was terrible.
How do you do that as a kid? And the senior can have been more than 16 or 17, and you did that to 12 years. And it stayed with him, and now he's tired. So the thoughts of Nigeria, you know, it's, you know, they don't want to do it. They don't want to come here.
Right.
Because of what he's thinking.
Wow. Well, I wanted to bring you up on the show because I've seen the things that you're doing in Nigeria. I mean, I know you don't want me to, brag on you a little bit, but what you are doing is a big deal, especially in this time and season that we're in, and how, most Nigerian children are now becoming very emotionally intelligent, very different from how were probably raised. And I think that what you're doing with journaling, for instance, I mean, we all, we're girls, we all keep our little secret books or whatever, we did that growing up, but what you're trying to say is there's an intentionality with journaling that actually helps when it comes to writing down what it is that you're feeling, or even finding a community of people who can help. So I would like you to just talk a little bit more about, your course and, how people can get in contact with what it is that you do, or even reach out to you if they needed to, take part of this, of your course, be part of it. What can they do and where can they reach you?
For now, I'm doing some behind the scene work, but for now, I say can message me on Instagram.
So, do you think that there's a correlation between our colonial past and mental health of Africans?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think, right, to be your full self, you have to accept all of you. That's what self-awareness is about. Accepting who you are, what you are. I'm very, very, very proud of where sometimes people ask me where I'm from. I say I'm from a village called Dura. That's in my village in Kaduna State. I'm really proud of, who I am. And that's because it was pounded into me as a child. I like that. But and then I like pronouncing Nigerian names properly.
Yes.
Like if you tell me your name is Ijoma, I'll say, don't worry, it's a Yoruba name. I don't care. I want to know how to pronounce it properly.
Yes.
I'm very proud of my Nigerian culture, not because it trends sometimes, but just really proud of where I come from.
Yes.
But I think we would have developed a bit more if we didn't have that colonial interruption. Right. I think some of our African backgrounds or
on speaking on that just a little bit, I think when I bring up our colonial past, for Nigeria in particular, we really mirror a lot of the British ways of doing things, the British hierarchy, the British royalty. We also have our versions of royalty and highnesses and kings and queens and things like that. And we also have, I don't want to call it a mentality of, for instance, if you see somebody who has special needs, that people on the streets, that have to have special needs and now have to beg. We see them on the streets all the time. We almost become very desensitized to it. Can we even think about their mental health, not being able to take care of themselves? And I've spoken to a lot of people in Nigeria with special needs who feel like if they were to get help from our country, it'll almost be like it's a pity versus a right, if that makes sense. And this all is tied into the mental health of our nation and how we look at people with disabilities, and it all ties into how you can have a beautiful house that is so big and a mansion, and right next to it, there's a little shack.
Exactly.
Right next to it. And this is the construct of our nation. So, I bring that up with the colonial past because that hierarchy and that, maybe sometimes, and you meet some good people who really are doing good things in Nigeria for people who are in need. So again, I don't want it to be like we're just bashing Africa and all that. No, there are people who are doing things, but there's so much more that we can do. I think if all of us put our hand on the plow, it'll make the work less and we will go further, faster together.
Back in the day, wasn't there those things, but back in the day, really, it was a community. Right. So I don't think I think there are more beggars on the streets of Nigeria than that. No, why? Because there was a family system. And he he's crippled now. How do we take care of him? So he stays at home and we take care of him. We feed him, we clothe him, we do everything for him. Now, there are more people out there in the streets because people are like, oh, we can't deal with this right now. So these guys fall out in the streets and people use them for money. A lot of these beggars used as front men to get, money and all of that. There's something that happened in my village some years ago. This boy returns home. He's never been in the village. His mother was from, his mother or father was from that village. And one day he says, let me go home and find my mother's kin. And he goes there and they were so happy. The whole village came. That was like 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 years ago. They all came down. Wow, this person's son has come home. Mm-hmm. And within a short period, they got a piece of land for him. And they gave him for free. You understand? So right. If this guy had nothing, there was this whole sense of community that felt, okay, this is our own. Let's take care of that. But it's becoming less popular. I feel that there's this kind of exchange of like changing the baton or something, because I've had some white friends that left their jobs, moved to a different country to take care of their in-laws, while I don't think many Nigerians will do that. So the Western world is embracing, it looks like to me anyway, and they're more open to embracing the family system and the community than we are. We are evolving, so to speak, and they are looking at some of our values and embracing them.
Wow. That's a very interesting point. So where do we go from here? With you doing what you do with journaling, and I'm bringing it up a lot because I want people to know that this is a way that you are supporting your community and our community by encouraging more people to journal. And honestly, it's the nature of our country, Nigeria, is that it's really hustle and bustle depending on where you live. So people are trying to eat. So why the heck would they want to be journaling? You understand? I mean, let's try to be realistic with people's situation. It almost seems like, a problem for people who have money. You can be writing your thoughts, but if we can just bring it home to how to, to help our people, that there is a way to do both if we had time, because there is healing in that, which is what I want to say, is the healing in the journaling process and in what you do and how you're trying to support, your community, especially maybe young people or anybody. How can we just keep doing that and encouraging that in our communities, whether it's on the continent or in the diaspora?
I think a lot of mental health, I talk about journaling, you're right, but there are all kinds of journaling. There's arts journaling, there's written one, which is the most powerful because you're documenting thoughts and making plans. But there's arts journaling. And sometimes when people do my course and they're like, I don't like writing, I don't have time to write, I don't like writing in the first place. And I say, okay, there are other ways, and we explore other ways of doing it, and it works out. So there are different forms of journaling. For normal everyday people, I think I talked about the family and community. If there's something worrying me, the first person I probably call is my sister or brother, or and talk with them. But in a sense where there's a disengagement, where you're not connected, now what happens? Then you look at your friend group. If that doesn't happen, you look at your church group. It just keeps getting quiet and you go there. And also it's about being mindful about those around.
The reason why I wanted you on this show is that I sense that there was a force of something that you were doing that is necessary in this time. And we have more mental health advocates in Nigeria than we did years ago. And like you said, we have people who studied psychology, but because there was no support, no resources, they moved to a different career. But things are changing. So with your voice and your story, and again, I love how you admire your dad on social media, because you could tell that you had a close relationship with him
and that he is the foundation to why you are almost an advocate for people who maybe just need someone to talk to, or you have that intuition to say, this person might just need me to say hello or just check in on them. You know, we need to do more of that, you know, with our people, you know, with our culture. I know sometimes people don't like to show a lot of themselves because you don't want people to talk about you. You don't want them to carry your gist or your story, you know.
Or take you as a prayer point.
Or take you as a prayer point. You know, so you don't, so people don't want to go into community because, you know, back here, like in the States, a lot of us that came here, you come and you rush into a Nigerian community, and before you know it, your gist, your story is all over with everybody. So people, even Nigerians, don't really communicate that much. You know, it's like you hear Igbo in the store and you're like, I know you're Igbo, but I'm just going to act like I'm American today. I'm not, you know. We can't, you know, it can't be that way. It is about community because a lot of us are suffering, and we're not supposed to do life that way. We're supposed to do life connected, you know? And of course, we're not saying don't be wise and just, you know, just talk to anybody if you don't know, you know, at least still be safe, of course. But with our culture and our people and Africans, we have to find a way to find our tribe, you know, find people that we trust. And talk, and with what you do, journal and write. And I like the fact that you said there are different types of journaling. And I would love people at the end of the podcast, I will have your information so that people can reach out to you and ask you more about journaling, you know, through art and any other way that can help as a therapy.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a great way to catch up on a podcast. And I know that this won't be our last time. Thank you so much for sharing, you know, your dad and his words and your stories. Thank you for sharing your information and your thoughts. Is there anything else you would like to leave with our listeners about mental health awareness on the continent of Africa and in Nigeria? Any last words?
Look, don't let anybody tell you that your feelings are not valid. They are valid. And if you find it hard to get someone to talk to, I don't think it's so hard. You have mostly your Christians and Muslims. You have your local church. You have your local mosque. Reach out there or go online and find someone to talk to. And you can talk to me, yes. But then there are also psychologists that you can talk to. And you find it hard, you could message me and I probably will refer a couple of people you can talk to. Yes. Do not ignore the feelings, because if you ignore your feelings and everything, it becomes something bigger. And by the time you find out what it is, it's almost too late sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Let's invest in mental health awareness on the continent of Africa, especially with individuals with disabilities. It's in doing this that we can increase understanding and reduce stigma in the shame of not being okay. It's okay not to be okay and not to feel okay. It's also okay to reach out for help and talk to a mental health professional in your area. Thanks for listening to Miss IJ's Kids Inclusive Podcast this week. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so on our website at www.ijpopoola.com. Or if you want to write to us about topics you would love to hear covered on the show, the email address is popoloijelma@gmail.com, one word. And if you'd like to follow us on our social media pages, it's at Miss IJ's Kids. I am IJ Popoola, and you've listened to Miss IJ's Kids Inclusive Podcast.